schools, we got money for kids, we got money for roads, we got money for buildings. Oh, I'm so sorry. It's you know, it's too bad it stinks to be you, right? But they were made a state after you. Same terms, same general terms in the disposal of the land. Why? Why?
No integrity.
Only solution big enough, right? Certainly economics, but in terms of education equality, the states in the West have the hardest time increasing funds for education because we don't have the tax revenue, we don't have the tax base. Look at this. This is on the top. This is wildfires over 250 acres. Right? Any similarity there? You can't make this stuff up. Along with this, again, you can't make this stuff up. This is coming out from the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI just last year. Criminal activity alert from the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI. Here's what they say. Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula in their Inspire magazine, that's what Al-Qaeda calls their terrorist magazine, isn't that nice? Inspire, that's clever, isn't it? Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula in their Inspire magazine encourages the use of wildfires as a form of jihad. This is coming out right now. So our forests have gone from producing wealth to being a weapon. Here's their map. Right? That's their map in their Inspire magazine that they say, look, they've given us the weapon. Instead of using that abundant resource to educate children, create a healthier forest that doesn't suck up so much water, so you've got your streams flowing and you've got your watershed, it's now a weapon. By the way, state managed forests, I was just in a meeting with our Association of Counties yesterday. State managed lands where there's grazing, the grazing actually produces a lusher landscape. And so pictures where the fire ravages right up to the barbed wire fence. And you know what? That barbed wire fence just stopped the fire. Some of you get that, right? Because on one side of the fence, it's been managed and grazed. Because people on the land that are more responsive and responsible that live there and manage the land, the fire comes right up to that barbed wire fence and stops. Same thing with the forest. Ravages right through the federally managed forest and stops. You get proper spacing in your forest with your state foresters working on it, fire drops to the ground. Here's what, this is just a few photos, but we're killing tens of millions of animals in these things. We don't talk about this stuff. We're killing millions of animals in these fires. You know, we don't like to look at this stuff, but it's happening. Protected species. This is the dump fire in Utah. I mean, this is about wildlife preservation. It's about education equality. It's about better care for the land. Because you know what happens after the fires, right? After the fires, and you've got rain, and you've got no ground cover. Now you're decimating your watershed for decades. All because, even, I mean, I don't know, I think you probably have this in Colorado. Do you have the beetle kill issues here? Think about that. Think about that. The trees are dead. The beetles are there. We had areas in Utah where it was about 30 acres. And they said, let's go in and cut that out right now. Now, part of the problem with the trees, many of you know probably better than I do, it's that density that makes the weaker trees, because they don't have the spacing, that makes them susceptible in the first place, I understand. And so because you have the greater density, they're now more susceptible. But even when you discover the beetles in there and say, let's go nip it in the bud, no, you can't do that. Now whole forests are standing dead. Even with the forest standing dead, you can't touch a tree. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. This is about education equality, greater care for the land, wildlife preservation. Let's see here. Now get this, okay? This is the Institute for Energy Research a month ago, 2 months ago. Institute for Energy Research, 150 trillion in mineral value locked up in the federally controlled lands. This is the Government Accountability Office last year. Government Accountability Office, that's the chief auditor for the United States. More recoverable oil in Colorado, Utah, Wyoming than the rest of the world combined. That's right here, right? That's right here. Than the rest of the world combined. And yet 46.1% of Colorado's revenues, their spending, is federally sourced. I'm willing to guess that Colorado, like Utah, that's the #1 line item of revenue in your budget. It's federally sourced funds, and those promises are being violated already. They're not, PILT, SRS, mineral lease, already. So let me show you, well, this is a video of that. That's just
The Green River Formation in Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming contains the world's largest deposits of oil shale. Being able to tap this vast amount of oil locked within this formation will go a long way to help to meet our future demands for oil. The U.S. Geological Survey, as you noted, estimates that the formation contains about 3 trillion barrels of oil, of which half may be recoverable. As you can imagine, having the technology to develop this vast energy resource will lead to a number of important socio-economic benefits, including the creation of jobs, increases in wealth, and increases in tax and royalty payments for federal and state
governments, she said. But that's the U.S. Government Accountability Office. So, isn't that just amazing? This federal fault line. Why the difference? California's made a state in 1850, Oklahoma's made a state in 1907, Colorado's 1876, North Dakota is 1890. North Dakota's 1890, Idaho's 1890. Same language of disposal in the Enabling Act. Why the difference? Well, we've already talked about this. The feds want $18 million back from timber counties. They've already paid the money, now they want it back. Mineral lease monies, that's $108 million. That is revenue. If you're North Dakota, you keep 100%. If you're Colorado and Utah, yeah, we decided we're not going to pay that. We're having budget issues, we're not going to pay that. Because we didn't keep a prior promise to dispose of the land, so we're not going to keep the later promise, and we're just going to control the revenues flowing into your state whenever it suits the federal government. And so these are serious issues where 46% of our revenues in our state come from one source that tells you in their financial statements, that tells you openly in your financial statements that they're unsustainable, which by definition means it will end. And 46% of your revenue comes from that source. Better have a backup plan. Right? Again, I'm not an accountant, so don't, but better have a backup plan. Oh, I didn't show you that one. Let's see. Have I got that? Oh, here we go. Check this out. This is March 26th. What's that? A week ago? 2 weeks ago? China has now compelled Ecuador to auction off 700,000 acres and all of the natural resources because Ecuador owes money to China. Could that happen here? I don't know. We owe China a powerful lot of money, but it just happened in Ecuador right now. So this, actually, let me back up for a second. So this is Senator Murkowski, March 19th. This was before the announcement that under sequestration they were going to cut the PILT payments, cut the SRS, cut the mineral lease monies. It was before that. But listen to what she says. This is about a 3-minute video.
The community of Wrangell, where I went to elementary school, is a community where 64% of their budget for the school comes from Secure Rural Schools Fund. When they don't know where 64% of their budget is going to be coming from on a year-to-year basis, it causes a great deal of stress. The PILT program, of course, is permanent, so we're not concerned about the program expiring, but what we are concerned about is the level at which the program is funded. PILT was created in 1976 by Congress because we changed our federal land policy from one that was focused on disposal to one that was focused on retention. These payments are literally payments in lieu of taxes to compensate our local governments for the loss in tax revenue caused by this change in policy. Secure Rural Schools, unlike PILT, was largely a replacement program for the receipt sharing programs, whether it's the Forest Service payments to states and the Bureau of Management that Oregon and California have for their payments. These payments made under these programs were historically from receipts generated by timber sales for roads and school purposes. But I think we recognize that they were never intended to be a permanent entitlement program, but more specifically a temporary short-term bridge to allow the communities to transition to the new economic reality that was forced upon them by environmental policies that were designed to halt timber harvesting. But if you're a community like Ketchikan, where I was born down in southeast Alaska, Ketchikan, their private taxable lands within the Ketchikan Gateway Borough are 0.3%. 0.3%. So if you have no other place to go, if 96.5% of the land in your borough is held by the federal government, the state has 1.3%, the local government has 0.3%, there is 0.3% that is taxable land. So when you say you've got this federal policy that says you can't harvest within the Tongass because we're just saying you can't harvest in the Tongass, and you have no place to go for your tax base, and we say, well, this is just going to be a temporary program for you until you can transition. The question is, what do you transition to? But I think we all know, I mean, we're having budget conversations this week. It's on everybody's mind. Federal government's broke here. We can't continue to pay counties to not utilize the lands within their boundaries. And Mr. Chairman, you have appropriately suggested where we need to go with this. You need to be able to access the resources that are on your lands. We either need to utilize our federal lands to generate the revenue and the jobs for our rural communities, or we should divest the federal government of those lands and let the states or the counties, the boroughs, manage them.
So they know, I mean, they know this is the only solution big enough as well. I kind of, because I used to work in Japan, and you know, when I come back here, I'm very interested in Japanese things. And do you ever see the tour buses? I don't know if they come through here, the Japanese tour buses. And they've got a cute little lady with a cute little hat on and a really nice uniform, and she's got a flag, right? And she carries the flag, and they all follow her. And they follow her and get on the bus. Well, I kind of liken that. This is the Japanese tour bus analogy. We've got a flag to carry, and just like they succeeded, Illinois and Missouri and Louisiana, that had very similar promises at statehood to dispose of the land, they carried that flag until people got on the bus and said, yeah, we need to transfer the land. Well, just like Senator Murkowski has said, we can't afford to pay, federal government's broke. We can't afford to pay counties to not utilize their lands and their resources. I agree entirely. And the conversations are already happening that we need to divest these lands. Well, guess what? How does that happen? It's by, well, let me show you. Well, let's just go right here. So let's talk about how that happens. It's already starting. In Utah, we realized that $5.2 billion of our $13 billion budget, federally sourced, realized that, like Senator Murkowski said, the federal government's broke. Well, for my children, I can't tolerate just saying, oh, well, too bad, that's going to be hard for them. No, there's a resource, there's a solution big enough. Just keep your promise. Just honor the same promise that you already kept with North Dakota, was made a state after Colorado. Just keep the same promise you made with with Oklahoma that was made a state after Utah. Just keep that same promise. But that requires not being silent. And it requires leverage. If I can get my slide to work. There we go. It requires leverage. I mean, that's what they did. That's how they succeeded. Think about it for a second. Archimedes, give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum on which to place it, I'll move the world. What does that mean? What does that look like? Well, any of you feel like you're trying to lift the world all by yourself? It's hard, isn't it? Stop it. Just stop it. Our system was designed that you don't have to lift the world by yourself. If you are, you're not living our system. Our system is a republic of republics of republics. So you can go get your family and get you and your family and try to lift the world. It's still pretty hard, right? Well, so now you go out and get some friends. Well, how easy is it going to be that close on that fulcrum? Well, guess what? I can go get organizations like farm bureaus and cattlemen's and recreation groups. And now my one voice is 100 or 1,000. But guess what? I can go to my city, and I'll show you some things here in a minute, that I can go to my city and say, would you weigh in on this? Because you're my closest representative to secure my life, liberty, property, my health, safety, welfare. That's what we elected you to do. Remember what it says? To secure these rights, governments plural, exist. Governments are created by men to secure these rights. So city governments are created to secure those rights, first and foremost. County governments are created and exist to secure those rights. State governments exist to secure those rights. So that's what a republic of republics. So now, if you've got your city passing a resolution and being persistent in their voice in every communication they have with their county and with their state and with their national leaders, they say, when are you going to keep the promise? Because I see some things on the horizon that I'm going to have a hard time educating my children and providing for public safety and caring for the land and managing the lands. It's not hard to see this on the horizon. And so we've got cities now passing resolutions and weighing in saying, it's the only solution big enough. Well, guess what? Now you got cities, you got counties. We got resolutions coming from counties all over. Some of you mentioned San Juan, right? San Juan County and their cities, they're sending resolutions up weighing in saying, Governor, Attorney General, congressional delegations, state representatives, do everything in your power to make this happen, because it's the only solution big enough. You know, now you get national organizations, you get states united. Let me tell you what's happening. Right here, I'll just scroll through this here just quickly. You get states working together, because that's how it happened when Illinois, that was 90% federally controlled, and Missouri, that was 90% federally controlled for decades, they banded together, refused to take no for an answer, and continue to move things forward. So let me tell you what's happening. Utah, we passed our bill last year, House Bill 148, my bill, Transfer of Public Lands Act. Any of you ever been in a negotiation where the other side held the property, and you were working on the property? Right? You've been in that situation? Well, if you're in that situation, delay becomes a tactic. Yeah, we'll get back to you next year. We'll get back to you 2 years from now. We'll get back to you when we feel like it. So one of the critical things that we did in my bill was we set a deadline. December 31st, 2014. We want to work out an orderly transfer of these lands, and we set a deadline that we're working toward. And then in the bill, we say that the lands will be federal public lands become state public lands for the multiple use, sustained yield with local planning. That's what the promise of FLIPMA was that wasn't kept. But if we were back in 1896, the deal back then was sell as much of the land as you can, transfer the lands to the states after that. We're not in 1896 anymore. We've been 100 plus years down the road, grazing and recreating and hunting and fishing and all the rest. So in the bill, we take all those rights, preserve them, and carry them over status quo. multiple use, sustained yield with local planning. We're already doing it as a state on our school trust lands. You graze on trust lands, you recreate. Yes, sir.